Okay, so welcome back. Episode number 91 of the Locker Room Podcast. Haven't been a host for a while, so welcome back to all our listeners. A massive interview for me today, and huge gratitude for Gareth Ainsworth who's coming on the podcast. So, Gareth, thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, welcome, Ross. Absolutely welcome. It's nice, and hopefully, a few people will get to know a bit more about me and the things that I've been doing recently.
Brilliant. No, we really appreciate your time. We're calling today building culture and the environment, something that you believe in quite a lot. So we're going to go into a little bit of detail around that. So thank you again from the listeners and myself for you coming on.
No problem.
We'll go into your detail, but obviously anyone who hasn't heard or doesn't know too much about Gareth, obviously just recently QPR manager, ex-QPR manager, Wycombe manager for an extensive period of time, and then an extensive playing career that we'll touch upon on your journey. So a man with lots of experience within football and outside as well that I'm sure he's going to bring to the table. So a very exciting one today. Just before we get into it, I just want to guide everyone towards steelysportscience.com. So loads of things going on at the minute. We've got online fitness classes for exclusive to members. We've got our winter webinar series that's coming up that I'm kicking off on Monday night, which covers a whole range of different topics from physical and tech tack and lots of different coaching expertise as well. So head over to the website if you're not a member. Have a little look. There's a few little offers on there going on. Okay, Gareth. So it's hard for me not to call you Gaffer. Actually, it's only been a couple of weeks, so it might take me a bit of time to get used to that. I think you said to me before it's the first time since you were 16 that you've not been working in football in some capacity. How's things at the moment? How are you getting on?
Yeah, it's been a weird one, Ross. It's been a funny sort of 10, 12 days now. It's been since obviously the Leicester game, which ironically we played quite well in, but results up to then haven't been great, and obviously the club's sort of had its troubles over the years, and I think they've gone again a change, and that's absolutely fine. I think I was at peace with that. I could tell things were happening, the results weren't great, so it's just the being out of it that's been weird, So I think I spoke to someone the other day, and since 1987 is the last Saturday that I had without being signed to a club, which is absolutely crazy, in any capacity. I had a couple of rejections, but it was only like a month out, and then you're back in, and that was when you're 18, 19, which I'll talk about in a minute. But last Saturday was a really, really strange, experience. It was the first time I hadn't been signed to a club, so I had no vested interest in any club except Blackburn Rovers, who's my hometown. And even that, the affinity with them has diluted over the years with what I've done in my career. And when you're playing elsewhere and managing elsewhere, it does dilute that sort of relationship with your home club. But yeah, really weird one. So I got a few friends round together and we watched it together. I can't say I didn't have a beer or two because I thought I don't want to just sit there and just mope about and wait for the goals to go in. We had a bit of fun. We had a good day, and I got through the day quite well. And people don't understand that it becomes part of you. You've been in football that long, it becomes who you are. And again, I'll talk about that in a little bit because there is some people who absolutely are there. It identifies them, and I didn't ever want to be that sort of person. I have other interests in my life, but it was a weird situation. So to get through that was nice. To see QPR get a point. Believe me, I'm not one of these people who are bitter and look and think, I hope everything fails now I've left. I actually hope the opposite. I hope QPR absolutely fly because there's great people there. The staff are great. The club itself is great. It's not the club I played for. It's changed a lot since then, but I've got a vested interest in some of the players I brought in as well, and I really want them to succeed and do well. And hopefully, played a real proud moment in keeping them up last year in the Championship. I know we only had, I think, 8 points, I think, when I left. So if those 8 points can go towards keeping us up this year, I can say I did a little bit as well. But it was a weird one. But no, absolutely getting stuff done around the house and picked up the guitar again and like I say, other things to occupy my mind. What I do is I go to the gym every day. I make sure I do that because I'm a big believer in sort of, I did it when I was working, obviously, but once you get a workout done and you feel good about that in the morning, the rest of the day can become a bit of a breeze. So I think that if anyone is, you know, in the moment of not doing anything or feels a bit down or something, I tell you what, exercise is a great way to start the day. A lot in the morning, especially, you know, you feel like you've achieved something already with that. Even a 30-minute workout, you feel like you've achieved, and then the rest of the day you can crack on and maybe have that chocolate bar later in the afternoon, and that makes you feel better as well. But you've had your gym session, so no, little things that have meant a lot to me.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thanks. Well, you touched there a little bit about your past and the kind of relationship with Blackburn Rovers and stuff over the years. I know you love Berkshire now and London. I know you've been here for a while, but that accent's really strong and your love for the North is really strong and passionate as well. Tell us a little bit about your journey from playing, how you grew up, and then how that transitioned, I guess, into managing.
Yeah, I mean, we could go a long time, so I'll give a whistle-stop tour of this. Big football fan growing up. You know, Dad was a big football player, non-league football player around the Blackburn area, and Mum was a decent athlete as well. You know, she played a high standard of netball, which I sort of get that from. You know, the sporty sort of influence was always there, as well as a music influence. Mum was a musician, and Dad was an avid rock and roll gig goer. You know, so those two things also will play a part later on, I'm sure, in the talk, but. Blackburn Rovers season ticket holder from the age of 6, and then didn't really get in my school team till I was about 14, 15, you know, and was a late developer, and then sort of shot through and was faster than everyone, was stronger than everyone. And I don't know why. Sometimes it happens, and I think that's an interesting one for people watching, you know, coaches watching. You know, you can't judge people at 13, 14. People say to me, is my son going to make it? And I say, well, let me see him when he's 19, 20, because then you get a real view of someone. And I was one of those. I was never going to make it at 13, 14, 15, 16, just surpassed everyone. I remember one guy in the team was an Irish international, and everyone was looking at him. He's the best player ever. And then all of a sudden I got better than him and got quicker than him and got stronger than him. And so Blackburn offered me a 2-year apprenticeship, dream come true, hometown, club I supported. Back in the day, it was YTS. This is about 1987, as I said earlier. And 2 years did that. Colin Hendry, Simon Garner, a big hero of mine, you know, cleaned their boots. And after 2 years, was told I wasn't going to make it, you know. And but the 2 years time taught me a hell of a lot about football. I'd never played men's football so much, and so we got in training with the first team in that. Real got a passion for it, and one big influence in my career, the biggest probably, my dad. Said to me, "Don't worry, I think you've got enough to make it." And lo and behold, Preston North End came knocking. Said, "Do you want to come on trial?" Went on trial there. Didn't make it after a month, and went to sign for Northwich Victoria in the conference under a guy called Sammy McElroy, people know from Man United. Preston then came knocking back saying, "Oh, you've actually done all right at Northwich. We'll give you a contract." And ended up going to Preston North End. Made my league debut in 1991, I think, and then ended that season. And again, a knockback. You know, I was told I wasn't going to make it again. But by this time, I'd put myself on the map. And a scout called Glenn Burnell, who I'm still in touch with today, got a great eye for a player. I have to say that because he spotted me. But he's a good guy. Took me to Cambridge United. And I'd say that this is where my journey started. This is where my education of football, and not just the physical side. It was always a physical sport for me. It was always this guy called John Beck was the manager of Cambridge United, and he taught me at 19, 20, well, 18, I think I was 18, 19 years old, the mental side, how that plays such a huge part in the game, way beyond his years. John Beck gets a bit of stick for his style of play. He was billed as a bit of long ball and had this method that he used, but the players I went down there, Dion Dublin and you know, Stevie Claridge and Alan Kimball, you know, some real, I went on to the Premier League, some of these players, you know, he made them, and he said to me, "I'll make you a Premier League player." And I'd just been released by Preston. I didn't realise he was going to make that come true, but meeting John Beck was a pivotal moment of my career. The irony is 6 months, not even that, 4 months into my Cambridge career, I made my debut on the Saturday, scored the winning goal against Bristol City. This is the Championship, by the way. The Cambridge were in the second tier, believe it or not. Probably look it up, because they were actually in the second tier, and they just got to the playoffs for the Premier League and all this. But this season was our second season in the Championship. I scored the winning goal against Bristol City on the Saturday. John Beck got the sack on the Wednesday. So he put me in the team. I scored the winning goal. He got the sack on the Wednesday. He got the Preston job. So the first player he came back from was me. Took me back to Preston, so back to the Northwest, and then yeah, 3 years there. Ross, John again got the sack at Preston. He was great. He was brilliant at getting the crowd together and really good motivator. One of the best I've worked for. But his style of play just kept this tag with him. The cold showers and that. We do ice baths nowadays. He was doing cold showers back then, and it sort of went against him. But you know, now it would probably go for him because he was ahead of the game. He got the Lincoln City job. So I went to Lincoln City. I think it was for about £5,000 and or initially, and then it raised into like £50,000. And the one moment I always thought as a kid at school, if one day somebody would pay money for me to be a footballer, that was a big moment for me. My league debut was a big moment at Shrewsbury away, but that somebody had actually paid money for me. It was John, who we'd been with for a while, but he actually paid, a club paying money. That's like a big moment for me. I don't know if it is for the footballers, but actually a transfer fee, you know, it means somebody really wants you. So 2 years at Lincoln City then. And John again got the best out of me. You know, I scored 25 goals in my first season, I think, and then the second season came. We finished well, and Port Vale. Then they lost Steve Guppy and John McCarthy, two fantastic wingers. They moved on, and they were Championship. Lincoln were League Two, and Port Vale paid £500,000 for me. I think a record. I think it's still their record transfer fee, which is nice. It's a nice thing to have. But John Rudge, wily old manager, really good guy. He took me from John Beck, where I'd refined all the physical attributes and this mental thing that I'd started, you know, this desire and this drive in my head. John Rudge took me to Port Vale, £500,000. I played 1 year in the Championship, and John really refined me as a footballer then, passing rather than the physical side of the game. And yeah, after 1 year at Port Vale, Wimbledon in the Premier League paid £2 million for me to go to the Premier League. So from sort of 19, 20 being told, 18, 19 being told I wasn't going to make it. I think 4 or 5 years later, I got signed for £2 million in the Premier League. So anyone who's looking, and you know, if there's any potential players looking, don't give up. You know, it's people's opinions, and that's when it came to me. It's only people's opinions. This Joe Kinnear paid £2 million for me, Premier League, and yeah, went on to play for Wimbledon for 4 years. Injury hit, if I'm honest. You know, I was no regrets in football, but one sort of wish was I wish I'd have stayed fitter at Wimbledon. I sort of played through a little groin injury at the start. I went there without an injury, but after the 2 or 3 games, I started developing this little niggle in the groin and played through it a little bit. And a lesson to everyone there again: don't play through your injuries, because that turned into sort of a pubic overload thing that kept me out for a year and missed a great deal of Premier League football. You know, and by the time I'd come back, Wimbledon were in a relegation scrap. They came down. Played in the Championship a lot for them, but really missed the Premier League days, you know, and that would have been nice. But loan to Cardiff City from Wimbledon, and then permanent to Cardiff City. And we got promoted then at Cardiff City in the playoff final. This was League One now. We got promoted to the Championship in a game against QPR in the Millennium Stadium. And then Ian Holloway, who was the manager at QPR, saw me playing for Cardiff. And after the final, came up to me in the bar at the Millennium Stadium and said, "I'd like to work with you. I've seen what you do." And my contract had come to an end at Cardiff. So Cardiff had just been promoted to the Championship. QPR was still in League One. Ian Holloway was the manager, and he said to me that in the bar. And I thought, fancy that. You know, Cardiff were umming and ahhing about whether I'd play for them in the Championship. I thought, sorry, I'm going to go to QPR. So I went to QPR under Ian Holloway, signed a 2-year contract, and did 7 or 8 full seasons at QPR. Captained the club, which was one of the proudest moments of my career. You know, played with some brilliant players: Paul Furlong, who's still there, Kevin Gallen, Martin Rowlands, and some real fantastic players. We got promoted to the Championship. We were at the top of the Championship for years, and then John Gregory, Gary Waddock, Luigi Di Canio, Paulo Sousa, Ian Dowie. I mean, the story of the QPR management time in that area. Flavio Briatore came in, took over the club. Bit crazy. And because I was the oldest pro, I'm coming up 35, 36 now. And Ian Dowie gets the sack and Flavio puts me in charge for 5 games. And I had never ever an indication of trying to be a manager or anything, Ross. And then that moment, I was going down the road of physio. Actually, I was qualified as a physio. I tried to do my courses as a physio, but that moment when Flavio put me in a caretaker charge, that sort of whet the appetite. Thinking, do you know what? I wouldn't mind having a go at this. And then, but probably not under Flavio. So that was the end of that, really. A couple of caretaker stints, 10 games. Contract came to an end at QPR. Went to Wycombe, 36, 37. And I really believe that the way I'd looked after myself, and I'll come to that in a bit, the way I trained, the way I'd really done things and looked after my body, and the injuries I got at Wimbledon, that 2 years out probably, I got back at the end of my career. I really did. And I'd looked after myself. I trained hard. I was in the gym every day. I always did it to the max in training every single day. I never tossed one session at all. It was really full blast for me. And I think that paid back at the end of my career. And I played to 40 really in the league. I did one game at 43, but that was a cup game away at Northampton, but 40 actually in the league. Finished at Wycombe, and Gary Waddock was the manager, the ex-QPR manager. He took me to Wycombe. You can't thank him enough. And then when he got the sack, as managers do, I was given the player manager role, and temporary, turned that into a decent sort of finish to the season, and then became actual manager of Wycombe Wanderers. And it was sort of right place, right time, but also I'd had the taste at QPR. And I think that being the captain that I was, the leader that I was, I think they probably saw a few qualities in me that, these people see you and they go, right, yeah, he could do it. You don't actually think yourself you can do it. People see you and they go, right, yeah, you can do it. And then that sort of got me into coaching badges, coaching roles. And yeah, 10, 11 years at Wycombe with a rise from the bottom of League Two to the Championship. Some of the greatest memories ever at, Wembley COVID year. Nobody in Wembley Stadium beating Oxford United, and to get to the Championship. We survived on the last day of the season in my early days. Cup runs, Tottenham Hotspur, and just a real brilliant rise, which I can't credit the boys enough for. The boys were just fantastic. And then obviously in February of this year, QPR came calling after a few managers had sort of, one had left, one had come in to try and stop a losing run. Didn't go right. He went, I think, with Neil Critchley, and then after Neil, I came in and tried to pick up the pieces of a club that, yeah, was struggling a little bit, if I'm being honest. And yeah, so it was an interesting role at QPR as well. Keeping them up was a real proud moment, and glad to say you were involved there, Ross. You played your part, and we all were so proud of keeping the club up in the Championship. And yeah, unfortunately, the 14 games this season hasn't gone the way that we wanted it to, and yeah, just find myself sort of out of work now. But I think with the playing career and the management career, I think there's about 1,200, 1,300 games there, and I can't be thankful enough, to what's happened. And I say what you've achieved. It's what I worked for. It's what I strived. It's not. It's like I always looked at it as just work hard, Gareth, and you're lucky to be in it. And 34 years, it's not a bad stint. So but that was the story. Yeah, it's loads of resilience and then loads of hard work and breaks and opportunities. But big believer in when the opportunity's there, take it, see it, and take it. Yeah, really, really proud of what I've achieved over the years.
Yeah, you've been really successful, and it was never going to be that quick with what you've done in the game as a player and a manager. So you've done well to summarise it. Obviously, you was at Wycombe for 10, 11 years and hugely successful. And there was like videos going around at the end of how emotional it was for you to actually say goodbye to that great group of players and the camaraderie you had together. What was your mind thinking about QPR? It's obviously in a struggling time. There was a clear agenda of keeping the team up. You'd left a club that you've been there for so long, and you had such a great, I guess, following and comp status around what you'd done at Wycombe. How hard was that? And what was your mindset at that time?
Unbelievably difficult, Ross. Unbelievably difficult. When you talk about a family of players and a connection with players, there wouldn't have been a stronger one in the country. And I was the longest serving manager. I'd had more time than any other manager in the country of having their team. And what we'd achieved together as a group, we didn't mind showing our emotions. We lent on each other at Wycombe. We were there for each other. Believe me, it wasn't always plain sailing. But the group would pick me up sometimes. The players would pick the manager up. I'd pick the players up often, but the staff would pick me up. The staff would pick the players up. The players would pick the staff up. It was unbelievable. Some days I'd go in, Ross, and I'd feel a bit of a fraud. I'm thinking this place is just thriving and running itself, you know. And I think when you get to that as a manager, you kind of look back and think, you know what, it's not fraud. It's what you've put in place. And it's really hard sometimes to think about that as a manager and go, you know what, take some credit, Gareth. Because I'm that guy that doesn't do that, it was really hard sometimes. And nobody ever really comes up to the manager and says, well done. But it was nice to look back and say, you know what, I had a great group who would be there for me. And I mean, Testament was 12 days ago. I must have had 10, 12 texts off Wycombe Wanderers players, you know,
Okay.
as much as QPR players and people in the game, Wycombe Wanderers players, those players still picking me up to this day, you know. So leaving them was incredibly difficult. And that speech people will see online, you know, on Twitter, I think it got, was right from the heart, genuine, you know. I mean, so wrenching. Everything that we put in place together, the whole training ground we built together and made it what it is. Can't thank the people, the Couigs who were in charge at Wycombe enough for giving me the trust and what they wanted to do. And I'd probably say if I hadn't got to the Championship, Ross, with Wycombe, maybe that decision would have been even tougher. But I thought, you know what, we've been there with Wycombe Wanderers. We were in that Championship. What an achievement for that football club, you know, and that bunch of players. They were unbelievable. Every single one of them had achieved by getting to the Championship. And the challenge at QPR was just huge, you know, and it really attracted me that this club that was on it was a bit of a messy run. There was a few, obviously, management issues where things had gone on through the season, and I think they'd won 1 in 15 or 1 in 14, and it was like, right, I've got to sort of really think about this one. But the ex-player thing, you know, 175 games for QPR, and still have some people there that I knew. It wasn't just a yes, I want that. It was like, right, think about this one seriously and debate. But you know, to managing the Championship of such a wonderful club, I think I'd have been crazy to turn it down. And yeah, it was a great moment keeping them up at the end of the season. Really was.
Yeah, it really was. Well, let's talk about that environment and that culture you spoke about that you had for so long, and the place was thriving, because that's testament to yourself. How do you go about driving that? And what does it look like for you? What does that ultimate culture look like going into a team, and what you want to instill?
So it's really to get there. You've got to be consistent behavior all the time. You know, I'm a positive guy, and I always would ooze positivity every day. And but you can't just be positive and think you're going to get results. You know, you got to work hard as well. You can't just be positive going in every day and sit back and do nothing. You've got to live what you're saying, you know, every day. And I think that the one moment you dip below that line, the players will have you. They'll find you out as, oh, see, you dipped below that line, you lost it that day. And so I'm safe to say I've never done that. I've never dropped below that line. I've always been that guy, that positive guy. But cultures for me are not built by one person. It's built by the group. The group's so important. So recruitment, Ross, and believe me, I didn't have the group I wanted at the start at Wycombe. It took me 18 months and a survival scrap and almost down on the last day of the season to get out of that. A phenomenal escape. But I knew I needed to change. And it taught me a big lesson that day at Torquay, I think. I remember the year now, 2012, 13, I think it was that season, where we almost went out of the Football League, and that club had been in the Football League since 1992. I didn't want to be the manager who took them out, but I knew once we'd survived, as soon as that bus journey home happened, and by the way, that was a hell of a bus journey home, I knew what I had to do, and I got right on it of signing players and making some big decisions on staff and current players that were good guys, but they weren't the drivers that I wanted. Yeah, I think you need drivers in your squad, real culture drivers. You can't just get good people who are followers. You need drivers within your squad because you're a driver, but you got to get drivers in your squad. So I signed Alfie Mawson, I signed Paul Hayes, some real Matt Bloomfield, a new contract for him, just because I knew these guys would drive the club. They would drive what I wanted to get in this club, and I got rid of one or two that I thought were either blocking the drivers or just too passive. And there was a big turnaround of players. As well as that, a guy called Andrew Howard who came in as chairman, and really he was right on my level of he was tougher than me. He can really upset people and make big decisions, a big successful businessman. He taught me a lot about that, and a lot about the decision for the bigger picture, not just that one individual. And so getting drivers in the squad and then coming up with a leadership group, which I called my generals, was really important. You've got to get your generals on side. You've got to give them extra little privileges. You've got to talk to them, and the trust between you and the generals has got to be so close that that in that dressing room they're just going to resonate with everyone. And it's really important that you pick the right characters as well in your dressing room. You can't just pick your four best leaders if they're all 32-year-old white males who've always had all a successful career. You need a youngster in there. You need maybe some ethnicity in there to link with everyone. You need some real culture in there. And so we chose it really carefully. So the youngest player would have a connection in the generals. The oldest player would have a connection in the generals. The players who don't play have one. The new players who come in, they all have this connection with the generals, and the generals will drive. And you've got to empower these generals and a little bit of luck as well. I think you've got to have a little bit of luck that the generals are listened to by the young lads. And again, I think it's signing the other players who are receptive to these 4 or 5 people who are going to drive the culture, and the culture comes from you, and then the staff, and then into the generals. And that was big for me, So, and it took some time. And as you say, at 10, almost 11 years at Wycombe, you get to then that end stage of, wow, people there for years, Joe Jacobson, Matt Bloomfield, been there just years at the club, really knew. When you talk about an identity of a club, they are the club, these guys, and I remember when I left, they were talking about Joe and Matt taking over, and they would have run the club fine. They was that good. You have players like Gareth McCleary, Sam Vokes, massive players who played in the Premier League, just bought right into the culture was that strong. They bought right in as soon as they walked in the dressing room. And if anyone messed about, if anyone didn't do training right, I didn't have to pick them up. The other players would pick them up, and there's no bigger sort of power than your peers saying it. If the manager says it, it's his job. The manager's got to say it. But if your peers say it, that's massive. And that's what we had at the end. And when I came into QPR, that's what I wanted to try and introduce.
Yeah, you really did create something really special there, Gareth. You spoke about your backroom staff, and you spoke about people being drivers, and I know you're massive on energy, like people having real energy and bringing that to work. How do you then, so you construct the backroom staff like that, how do you interact with your backroom staff? Who do you have that maybe is slightly different to you and balances things and a bit diverse maybe?
Yeah, well, when I say I was lucky, when Gary Waddock got sacked, there was me and a guy called Richard Dobson. Now Richard stayed with me the whole time, and we both left QPR together the other week. But he's been with me from day one of my management career. Now, fortunately, he's the total opposite to me. So for me, that covers all bases. It covers a lot of, not all maybe, but a lot of bases. Because if it was up to me in the early days, I'd have probably gone, right, get my best mate, who's another energizer coming in. Who's going to plan? Who's going to be the strategic one? Who's going to be the quiet one who challenges us? I don't want to yes men all over the place. And the beauty of Dobbo is we've fallen out so many times. And I say that as a beauty because I remember actually recently speaking about a player in the January window. I'm talking about this player, this midfielder. I'm saying he's coming up and he was in, I think it was League Two, and saying, yeah, I think And he's saying, no, I don't think he'll make the standard. I'm saying, yeah, look, he's got this, he's saying, no. And what I'm good at and what Dobbo knows is I'm good at influencing. We did this Thomas International psychology test once, and I came out as a huge influencer. There's influencers, there's dominance, there's steadies, and there's compliance. I was a huge influencer. Now, an influencer and a compliant and a steady, you're going to influence those guys. The dominator, you can still influence him. Dobbo was a real steady. He came out as a real steady, and he's a massive introvert. And he said to me about this midfielder, he knows I can't influence him. He will be his own person. And I love that. So he said, no, I'm not going to just agree with you guys because you keep saying it over and over and you're trying different ways to convince me. He said, I'm not agreeing with you. And I need that sometimes. I need that. And that checks me. So anyone who's watching, if you feel like you've got someone exactly the same as you, then have a little check and maybe get someone else in and go, somebody to challenge. Now, you don't want some idiot who's going to disrupt, but you want someone who's going to keep you on your toes a little bit and challenge you, because you need that. I really believe in management, you need to be challenged. And so Dobbo, brilliant. But the opposite of me, quiet, methodical thinker, whereas I will win games on emotion and passion. And we're both coach, and you can get a manual and you can coach from a manual, but I think the characteristics of each person have got to be different, and we covered quite a few bases together.
Yeah, the irony is Dobbo was my youth team coach at Brentford many years ago, so that was good to see him come through the door. Anyway, familiar face. You spoke there about different, I guess, managing and different styles of managers. About you got the coaching, you got the way that you like to manage. What parts of the job do you really love, and then what little parts of the jobs do you think I don't love that so much? There's always parts of jobs that people think, yeah, I could do without that.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that the parts I love is coaching the boys. Putting a plan in place for us and coaching the boys to that plan and getting buy-in from the boys. When happened one or two times. I remember we went to Burnley, second last game of the season, and we had this real opposite plan to what we'd just been doing. We was trying to play. I brought this philosophy from Wycombe. I had the best physical team. I had a great physical specimens at Wycombe. We could run over energy-wise. We would never stop. We would fight, and we could run over teams. So we were man for teams. We go, I'm confident that this is going to happen. When I came into QPR at first, we had a few tough games. We had one where we did it against Watford, but then we tried to recreate it on the Tuesday against Blackpool, and we lost 6-1. And it was like, these boys, they can do it, but they can't do it for a suspended period like the Wycombe boys could. And it was League One. It's a different league. The step-up's different. So I started thinking, right, I've got to play differently. We've got to start thinking about different ways of getting the best. What as a manager now, I've got to think, my skill now is to get the best out of these boys here. We went to Burnley away, and I still say one of my finest moments. Burnley had destroyed everyone at home. They hadn't lost a game all season, and we went up there, and all I said to the boys was, all week we're going to sit in. We're going to sit in. They're going to come at us. We're going to soak everything up, because all teams had gone to Burnley was going, right, let's have a go at these, like the top of the league, let's have a go. And they pressed them and they tried to win the ball. Burnley were going in behind. They had pace down the wings. They were just opening teams up. So I said to the boys, there's going to be no space to open us up. We are sitting in. There is no space at all. We're camping on our 18-yard line. And the boys sort of on the Monday, they're like, oh my God, this guy's crazy. Like, what's this? And then Tuesday, they sort of got it a bit more. And I had to change the team a couple of times. I needed pace in the forward line to get in behind, because we were going to leave so much space behind Burnley rather than Burnley getting the space behind us. So to change the team and pick a couple of different players. And I remember Albert coming in the team, Albert Dolmer on the right, because he's very experienced, bought into it big time. I think Linden came back into the team up front, and Jamal Lowe, because they had pace to go in behind. And I felt for Chris Martin, because Chris is a fantastic striker, but it wouldn't have suited him maybe later in the game. And lo and behold, we all know what Chris Martin did later in the game. So that buy-in that week, that's what I love, and it worked at Burnley, and then coming in that dressing room at the end, we showed them a little Muhammad Ali, George Foreman video before the game, and so different ways of getting the message across. I said, Burnley are George Foreman. They're going to punch themselves out. They're going to come at you. They're going to and they're going to wonder why you've not fallen down in the second round, the third round, the fourth round, and then you take your chances. And honestly, I get little hairs standing on my arms now talking about it, because it went like that. They burned themselves out, and we got in behind them. We scored, and they were like, "What the hell's going on here?" You know, this wasn't in the script. They equalised, and believe me, Ross said I took a 1-1 right then, and then at the end we got a set piece, and Chris Martin scored that header that, you know. And I remember going to the dressing room and said, "There's 30 Muhammad Ali's got on that bus yesterday," and it was a great moment. And now those plans you put in place, when it works, that moment, and then the boys, the smiles and believing in you, and that makes it all worthwhile, you know. The tough bit, I suppose, is when players haven't quite made it, and they haven't quite made your standard, and you've one thing I've been guilty of, I think, is there's a famous saying that it's the hope that kills you. And sometimes I'm that positive and I'm that confident in a player that I'll give him so much hope. Sometimes I think to myself, guys, you've really, really pushed him, and I believe they would make it. And if they don't, I've given them so much hope that they would. That's a big fall sometimes, and that's hard, you know, Ross. And when you're releasing a player at the end of the year, or you're not playing a player, or he drifts out of the squad because of this, and it's all genuine. I really believed in that player. I wanted him to be better. I think one of my big strengths is making players achieve more than even they could think they could, and that's where we get to. But some of them just don't maybe get to that place that I thought they could, that they thought they could, and that's the hard bit, you know, because all they've wanted to do is footballers, and I've been there where I was told I wasn't going to make it. So I think one of my big strengths is empathy, and trying to put myself in their place. I think it's really important for coaches. If you've experienced that, use it with them, you know, and put yourself in their place. And all players want, when I was sat in an office with a manager or a coach and I wanted info, all I wanted was honesty. I didn't want them to give me any crap and say, "Oh, you're out of the team because of this or this." Don't beat around the bush. Tell me straight. And deep down, I know that, but I need to hear it from you, you know. So honesty, I think, is my number one thing, and I think that gains a lot of trust from the players, because they know you're going to be honest with them.
Well, I think your authenticity shines through, and in terms of the Burnley game, that was a fantastic day. I was fortunate enough to be in your backroom staff traveling. It was a rope-a-dope moment. We was camped in. I remember you saying in training that even when they put down a goal kick, just run back to the halfway line and they won't know what to do.
And it took a goal kick short, and they looked up, and we're like 30 yards away, and it's like, oh, this wasn't in the script. So again, you know, sometimes upsetting people and going off script, because there's many games where it's gone like, oh, this is going to happen this way. As coaches and managers, try and disrupt it. Try and disrupt something and make something happen. I think they're your best moments at times.
Yeah, 100% agree. Just switching a little bit now from football, because I know it's another area that has real passion to your life and is close to heart. You're a lead singer of a band, and yeah, you've had a music career as well, and it's something you're really, really interested in. Talk a little bit about that for people that don't know what you do outside of football and where you're currently at with your band now.
So earlier in the interview, alluded to it. You know, Mum was a professional singer growing up, and so lucky to have that music in my world. You know, so I always say, Ross, a musician first, and football came second, and that's true. You know, it was always like, you can sing before you can kick a ball. Believe me, there's babies singing now that can't kick a ball yet. So I always say that was who I am, and that I think that keeping that with me has really been a strength for me. You know, having something other than football that sort of identifies you, and because as I said, you know, the last 12 days have been really tough. You're no longer the QPR manager. You're no longer a championship manager. You're no longer a footballer. You're no longer working football. What have you got? Who are you now? You know, and I've thought, you know, I've got some gigs lined up. I'm going to Norway next week to play a few gigs. I was out last Friday just doing a few covers with a friend, you know, so that's who I am, and that's me still, you know, and that's really important to me. But yeah, Mum growing up was brilliant. We saw a gig a few times, and she taught me to sing, which people say, can you sing or can you not? Everyone, well, a lot of people can hold a note, but there's breathing exercises and ways to do it, and head voice and things like that. So Yeah, I just wanted to carry that on. So from the age of about 25, I had the 7 years where I was football there. About 25 years old, signed at Wimbledon. Trond Andersen, the Norwegian guy, was we signed. He was a great guitarist. Chris Perry was a good drummer. We put a band together, and I just carried it right forward. And when I got to QPR, the band with Tron and that had all finished, and we'd all gone our different ways in football, as you do. But I met a QPR fan, Lee Sargent, lead guitarist. We're still together today. We formed a band called Dog Chewed the Handle. One, because it's a cool song, but two, you're not going to forget that name as well. So that was quite cool. And then eventually we've morphed into the Cold Blooded Hearts. So me and Lee, fantastic musician Lee, we wrote an album together. I say we. Lee did most of it. I was a bit part in it, but there's a couple of songs credited. And we've got 11 originals out on an album, The Cold Light of Day, by a band called the Cold Blooded Hearts, and we released that in July. And that's been doing okay. Steady. We're not number one, but we've had some good reviews. And if anyone wants to see the musical influences that I've had over the years, then download or buy that album, because that's it's doing okay. Yeah, we're really proud of it. And as I say, Monday nights was rehearsal nights, and I'd go down, and all it was remembering the lyrics, knowing what the chords next, and that was a real release for me over the years. And I think it's nice to have something away from football, because a lot of people do get identified just as football. I was on a course yesterday, and we through the LMA we do these courses. The LMA are great. They keep you in the loop, and but I just look around the room and think, how many people have got something else in their life, or is football just identify them? Because you see so many people who are just in it, and it must be tough if that's all they've got. I do really tell people to have something else, have another interest, because not one that doesn't take over football, of course, but or GA or whatever your sport is, but definitely have a release somewhere. I think it's really, really important. Even if you've got a dog or something, and you go home and you walk your dog for an hour, and you just get out there but have something. Don't be consumed by it, because it can be all consuming at times.
Of course it can. So download the album or travel to Norway for the gig.
It's cheaper on the album, right?
Brilliant. Thanks, Gareth. Well, Gareth, thank you very much. I've got one summarizing question for you now, and you might not be able to go into too much details or read the future, but for you, what's the future for Gareth Ainsworth? What does that look like long term? And probably depends on a few things that come up in the meantime.
Well, immediate future was when I left QPR, I thought I've got to have some direction. I've had a couple of calls off a couple of clubs, tentative things but I just said, look, just not yet. I'm 34 years. I just want to maybe take a step backwards, maybe learn a bit more about me, about the game. Maybe have a Christmas without football. I don't know. We'll see. The Boxing Day will be interesting, because I haven't had one of them for a long time. Do you know what? I made a promise to myself that I'm going to learn the guitar properly. I can't pretend that I've been a great guitar player. I've just been pretending most of my my musical career. So that's a big drive for me now. I want to practice every day and have an aim to be better on that and learn that properly. So that's an aim. That's something I wanted to drive towards. On the job front, I'm open. I'm really open. Whether it's this country, whether it's abroad, we'll see what comes. But I know for a fact that after the Wycombe Wanderers and the survival at QPR, there's plenty to offer. A League Two team wants to get to the Championship. I got a history of that. A League One team wants to get to the Championship. I got a history of that. And a Championship club wants to stay in the Championship. We did that as well. But honestly, being happy is really important as well. So just if I can keep smiling, like I say, I work out a lot. I try and keep myself fit. And just talking to people, I spoke to someone yesterday, and they said after they were sacked, they couldn't get out of bed for a week. And I feel for that person. I don't want ever people to go through that. get up and do something, get something done, even if it's a gym workout, a walk, or people say make your bed. Just make your bed. At least you've done something. You've achieved something that day already, and then everything's a positive going forward. It's a tough world, and football management's a tough world. But again, last thing for me is perspective, Ross. You know, I think I'm lucky that Mum always said, as well as being a fantastic singer, she always used to tell me, "Don't worry, there's always someone worse off than you." And when you look around the world, there certainly is. You know, and I think perspective is you know, I'm all this, you're all this, and wow, you got the sack from QPR, you must be really down. And I'm like, I'm not as down as some people in the world, you know, and perspective's big for me. So, yep, give you all, do everything you can, and go right back to the start. It's only somebody's opinions, you know, it's what you think that counts. And I just, if everyone can be happy, the world will be a great place.
Brilliant. Gareth, thank you very much. I had the huge pleasure of working for you. I loved every minute of it. I think your authenticity and how much of a nice person you are, first and foremost, has come through on this. So I'm very confident you'll be successful in the future. And we really appreciate you coming on and taking up your time.
Proud to have had you in my team, Ross. You're definitely a warrior, and we wouldn't have done it without you. But thanks everyone for listening, and good luck everyone in your careers.
Thanks, Gareth.